You hear it in the silence between conversations, the unspoken question hanging in the air like the faint scent of something forbidden. Why is she alone? She walks past you at the grocery store. No ring, no stroller, no visible trace of a man trailing behind. Her dreams are pulling at her sleeve with expectations. She selects her fruit carefully. Her eyes move slowly across the shelves, not hurried, not flustered, not performing. There is no one to impress, and yet, you can't help but watch. Is it admiration, envy, suspicion, or something more primitive? Something ancestral that recoils at the unfamiliar? Because deep down, a cultural code is breaking. There is a woman who wakes up every day in a bed that has only ever known her shape. She eats dinner without small talk. She listens to the creak of her apartment, like a musician listens to silence. Between notes, there are no text messages from someone asking her to compromise, no silent resentments growing in the shadow of togetherness, no diluted version of herself coexisting for the sake of harmony. Just her. And yet, her solitude offends something ancient in you. It defies a myth you didn't know you inherited. This is the paradox. We live in a world that glorifies independence, ambition, and self-reliance. And yet, when a woman lives those truths, fully and without apology, people begin to whisper, "Is she okay? Was she hurt? Did she give up? Why is a woman alone still seen as unfinished?" We tell ourselves we've evolved, that we've transcended outdated roles and archaic expectations. And yet society still assumes that a woman without a man is a woman who is either healing or hiding, as if companionship were her natural habitat and being alone a sign of exile. But what if the opposite is true? What if the woman who lives alone is not a victim of circumstance, but the architect of her own inner empire? What if she's not alone because she couldn't find love, but because she finally understood something most people never do? What if she has chosen solitude not as an escape from connection, but as a rebellion against dilution? Sit with that for a moment. Not loneliness, but solitude. Not absence, but clarity. Not waiting, but walking away. Still, the world keeps tugging at the narrative, trying to stitch her into the familiar tapestry. She'll change her mind. She'll meet someone. She'll regret this. But what if she won't? What if there's something deeper happening here? Something not just personal, but civilizational? What if her solitary life is not a glitch in the system, but a prophecy? When you strip away the noise, the norms, the endless demands of performative femininity, what remains? Who remains? And why does that remaining self make people so uncomfortable? Could it be that her existence is a threat not to men, not to marriage, not to tradition, but to illusion itself? Because if a woman can be whole without being half of a pair, then what does that say about the contracts we've been taught to sign with our souls? Every time she chooses a quiet evening with herself over a forced laugh in a loud room, she's not just choosing peace. She's waging war against the story of dependency. Every time she celebrates a milestone without needing external validation, she is rewriting what celebration means. Every time she decides that her bed is sacred, her space inviolable, her mind undisturbed, she is not isolating herself from love. She is rejecting the kind of love that costs too much. And perhaps that is the true scandal. Not that she is alone, but that she is unbothered. Unbothered by the gaze of tradition. Unbothered by the checklist. Unbothered by the ticking clock. She has exited the stage play and begun to write her own script, one where silence is not emptiness, but sovereignty. So here we are, watching her from across the aisle, across the internet, across time, wondering, what has she seen that we haven't? What has she lost that she no longer fears loneliness? What has she discovered that makes dependence look like prison? And the deeper question, the one we're afraid to ask, is she truly free? Because if she is, then what does that mean for the rest of us? And if she isn't, then what are we missing? The ground beneath you begins to shift. You're no longer observing her, you're confronting yourself. You're not asking about her life, you're asking about yours. And this is only the beginning. There is a wound in the collective psyche, stitched shut with rituals and reinforced with myths, but still festering underneath the surface of every culture. Every family, every woman who has ever dared to live without needing. From childhood, you are told what to want, not with whips or chains, but with lullabies and fairy tales. A prince, a wedding, a partnership that completes you. The word alone is never given the chance to become sacred. It is always painted as lack, as failure, as waiting room. But what if this was never about companionship? What if it was about control? Carl Jung once wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But how can one become anything true in a world that hands you a script before you learn your own name?" You were not taught to ask, "Who am I?" You were taught to ask, "Am I lovable?" That is the root of the sickness. It is not that society fears women being alone. It fears what they might become if they stop needing approval. The architecture of modern relationships is built not on wholeness, but on mutual incompleteness. The idea that two people complete each other is poetic, but it is also a subtle form of disempowerment. It suggests that to be whole on your own is a deviation from nature, an existential error in need of correction. Nietzsche said that marriage is the will of two to create the one, who is more than those who created it. But what happens when the will of two becomes a hiding place for the fragmentation of one? The woman who lives alone is not just physically separate. She is psychologically unhooked from this inherited expectation of incompleteness. She becomes a sovereign entity, and nothing terrifies society more than a sovereign woman. Why? Because a woman who does not need is a woman who cannot be controlled. You cannot sell her love as a transaction. You cannot threaten her with loneliness. You cannot bribe her with status. You cannot shame her with aging. Her solitude becomes her fortress, her philosophy, her power. But here lies the deeper wound, one that even she must wrestle with. For centuries, the feminine has been yoked to the relational. Her value has been tethered to who she nurtures, who she supports, who she belongs to. Even the language betrays this. Spinster, leftover, alone, rarely free, rarely whole, rarely choice. Schopenhauer, infamous for his bleak view of human desire, once observed that love itself is a trick of the species, a manipulation of the individual in favor of reproduction. He would likely see the solitary woman not as a rebel, but as an anomaly, a disruption in the machinery of natural selection. But perhaps that's exactly the point. Perhaps she is not here to serve the biological imperative, but to transcend it. To step outside the repetitive loops of history, to observe the dance without being caught in its rhythm. Aldous Huxley wrote of the heretical impulse, that deep, irrepressible urge in certain individuals to question, to disobey, to deviate from the hive mind. Women who live alone are not just rebelling against relationships, they are resisting a metaphysical programming that says you must lose yourself to find belonging. They are asking, what if I belong to myself first? Yet this is no easy path. Jean-Paul Sartre warned that freedom is a burden. To be free is to be responsible for one's essence, to carry the weight of one's choices without appeal to destiny or divine instruction. The woman who lives alone carries this burden. There is no one to blame. No one to distract her from herself. No one to validate her pain or her beauty or her becoming. She is forced to meet herself, daily, nakedly, ruthlessly. This is the hidden problem. Not that she is alone, but that her aloneness reveals the void in others. Her autonomy reflects their dependency. Her silence echoes their avoidance. Her sovereignty shatters the mirror they use to avoid looking inward. In psychological terms, what she embodies is individuation, the process Jung described as becoming fully oneself, distinct from the collective consciousness. But individuation is not comfortable. It is not cute. It requires the death of persona, the burial of social masks, the mourning of should-have-beens. She is not living alone. She is dying into herself, dying into the unfiltered truth of her desires, her fears, her unlived potential, and that death looks like madness to the world, which only understands women in the context of relationships. But madness, as Michel Foucault wrote, is often just another name for nonconformity. She is not mad. She is lucid in a world that has mistaken dependence for love and performance for intimacy. Still, the psychological roots go deeper. Gabor Mate's work on trauma suggests that much of what we call personality is actually a defense mechanism, adaptive behaviors that kept us safe in dysfunctional systems. Many women were taught to be agreeable, to sacrifice, to prioritize harmony. Living alone tears those scripts apart. It exposes the code behind the personality. When no one is watching, do you still perform? When no one is expecting anything, who do you become? The woman alone must answer these questions every day. That is her trial, her crucifixion, her becoming. She is not rejecting love, she is refining it. She is not avoiding connection. She is demanding that connection not cost her soul. And so she waits. Not passively, but consciously. She crafts her space, her rituals, her thoughts. She becomes a curator of her own being. And if love comes, it must find her whole. But that wholeness is what the world has forgotten how to recognize. Because a woman who does not orbit another becomes her own sun, and everything that cannot survive in that light must burn. She lives quietly, but her quiet is not without consequence. A woman alone is not simply an individual, living outside convention. She is an existential event, a tremor in the psychic architecture of a world that still believes a woman's life must be a supporting act to someone else's story. Her solitude, though chosen, becomes a mirror held up to those who never dared ask themselves what they truly needed, only what they were told to need. And mirrors are dangerous. We do not fear what the woman alone is doing. We fear what she is proving. Because if she can survive without the traditional dependencies, without the constant affirmation of being wanted, needed, claimed, then what does that say about the rest of us, who've built our identities around those very things? This is the beginning of the unseen consequences, not just for her, but for all of us. The first consequence is internal. Alienation. Not isolation, which is physical, but alienation, a philosophical and emotional dislocation. Sartre described it as the dizziness of freedom, the vertigo of looking into the abyss of one's own autonomy. To live without a man in a world that prescribes him as necessity is to exist without scaffolding. No default roles, no pre-written scripts, no automatic status. Freedom, unbuffered, can feel like exposure, and exposure, when prolonged, becomes exile. From certain conversations, certain dinner parties, certain social circles, people don't know what to do with a woman who isn't trying to become someone's partner. She doesn't speak their language anymore. She's not navigating life based on we or us. She's using a different compass altogether. This leads to the second consequence, social invisibility. Paradoxically, the more self-possessed a woman becomes, the more the world forgets how to see her. She is no longer legible to a culture that reads women through relational lenses. If she's not a wife, a girlfriend, a mother, then what is she? The archetypes fail. The marketing algorithms break down. The roles collapse. You see it even in the language people use. Still single, never married, childless, as though she were an unopened letter, a forgotten item on the shelf. But what if she is not unfinished? What if she is complete, and the world simply lacks the vocabulary to describe her? That failure of language is no small matter. Language creates reality, and when there are no words for your identity, your existence becomes a kind of ghosting by the collective mind. Not rejected, just erased. Then come the subtler consequences, psychological ones, etched deep beneath the surface. We are, as cognitive science reminds us, creatures of connection. Our brains are wired for mirroring, for resonance. We long to be seen, reflected, understood. The solitary woman walks a knife's edge between sovereignty and starvation. Starvation not of food or shelter, but of witnessing. There are days when her strength feels like a cage, when no one asks how her day was, when she hears her own laughter and realizes it hasn't been shared in weeks, when silence doesn't feel sacred but heavy, like a question echoing in a canyon. Does this mean anything if no one sees it? This is the cognitive dissonance of freedom. You escape the prison of performance only to enter the desert of authenticity. And yet the greater consequence is not her suffering, but ours. Because the presence of the solitary woman reveals the absence in others. She reveals how many women stay in relationships not because of love, but because of fear. Fear of being alone. Fear of economic instability. Fear of social scrutiny. Fear of becoming her, the one people whisper about. But beneath that fear is envy. Envy of the woman who can say no. Envy of the woman who doesn't tolerate disrespect because she doesn't need a man's income or his validation or his name to exist. That envy manifests in judgment. She's selfish. She must be bitter. She's too picky. Each phrase is a projection, a defense mechanism. What they're really saying is, if her freedom is valid, then my dependence is a choice I have to own, and that is intolerable. So the culture doubles down. Romantic love is marketed as the pinnacle of existence. Every story, every song, every commercial sells the same subtext. You are not enough until someone else says you are. The solitary woman becomes an anomaly, a glitch in the matrix, something to be fixed or pitied. But she does not want your pity. She wants your honesty, because the final unseen consequence is this: truth disruption. Her life breaks illusions. It forces everyone around her to confront the scaffolding they cling to, the half-loves, the codependent comfort zones, the performance of passion. She is not just living differently, she is exposing the fragility of the dominant narrative. Even neuroscience confirms this. Mirror neurons in the brain fire when we observe others, making us feel what they feel. When people see her calm in her solitude, her joy without justification, it triggers discomfort. Not because she's wrong, but because she's right in a way we weren't ready to admit. She is a walking invitation to examine your compromises, to ask, would I still be in this relationship if I didn't fear being alone? To wonder, who would I be if no one ever told me what I should want? To realize, perhaps she isn't the one who's missing out. Perhaps I am. And this realization does not arrive like thunder. It creeps in quietly, in the moments before sleep, in the pause after a forced smile, in the dissonance between what you post and what you feel. She has never spoken to you, and yet she's asking questions you've avoided your whole life. That is the power of her presence. She didn't set out to be a symbol, but she became one anyway, a symbol of what is possible, a reminder of what was lost, a prophecy of what might come. And now, the question is no longer about her. It's about you. What illusions are you still married to? What compromises have you disguised as love? And if you were truly free, what would your life look like? You weren't meant to live this way. Not in a cage made of social graces and forced laughter. Not in a script handed down through generations like a cursed heirloom. Not walking beside someone out of habit, need, or fear of the silence waiting at home. You were meant to live awake, not anesthetized, and yet you've been conditioned to believe that freedom is selfish, that solitude is failure, that wanting more than validation is arrogance. It's a lie, one of the most dangerous ever told. But here's the secret. Every lie contains within it the seed of rebellion. Every woman who sees the cracks in the illusion carries the blueprint for escape. And the solitary woman, yes, her, is not your enemy or your object of pity. She is the map you were never given. To break free, you must begin where all revolutions begin, in the mind. You have to unlearn the logic of dependency, the kind that says your worth is proven by who wants you, the kind that mistakes compromise for maturity, the kind that sells sacrifice as the price of being loved. Arthur Schopenhauer once said that the assumption that animals are without rights and the illusion that our treatment of them has no moral significance is a positively outrageous example of Western crudity and barbarity. And perhaps, in the same vein, the assumption that a woman without a man is lesser is a moral failure masked as tradition. It's barbarity with a smile. So how do you rebel? First, you must pause the performance. Stop editing yourself mid-sentence. Stop making yourself smaller so someone else can feel bigger. Stop curating your personality to be more likable, digestible, dateable. Each of these is a betrayal of your original self, the self that existed before you were told what being a woman should look like. This act alone is revolutionary, because when you stop performing, you start becoming. Then you must withdraw consent, not from people, but from narratives. Every time you see a story that equates marriage with success, or portrays aging alone as a tragedy, or frames motherhood as a requirement rather than a choice, withdraw your silent agreement. Refuse to let that story shape your worldview. Speak back to it. Question it. Refute it. Friedrich Nietzsche urged us to live as creators of values, not followers of morality handed down like factory blueprints. Become who you are, he said, not as advice but as a command. The woman who lives alone has done exactly that. She has authored her own values. You can too, but it means giving up the comfort of consensus. Comfort is the enemy of awakening. True rebellion requires discomfort. The trembling that comes before growth, the solitude that comes before clarity, the silence that precedes truth. Viktor Frankl, a man who survived unimaginable suffering, said, "When we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. Maybe you can't change the culture overnight, but you can stop being ruled by it. You can refuse to let its values dictate your identity." But rebellion is not just internal. It must also become ritual. Build a life that reflects your autonomy in action, not just in theory. Buy your own furniture. Make your own dinners. Travel alone, not as a statement, but as a practice. Create routines that center your desires, not someone else's schedule. Learn the difference between solitude and starvation. Understand that being witnessed is beautiful, but not necessary for beauty to exist. You were never meant to orbit someone else's sun. You were meant to burn on your own. History, of course, has its examples. Think of Simone de Beauvoir, who loved fiercely but never allowed herself to be caged by convention. Think of Emily Dickinson, who lived in seclusion not because she was broken, but because the world outside could not contain the vastness of her mind. Think of bell hooks, who wrote about love not as dependency, but as the courageous act of seeing another without ownership. They were not just women, they were rebels, and their rebellion was intellectual, emotional, existential. They asked, what if we built a life that didn't center around being chosen, but around choosing ourselves? That question is a fire. Let it burn away the illusions. Let it burn away the need to be completed. Let it burn away the shame of solitude. And from the ashes, let something new emerge. A woman who walks through the world, not as a half waiting for her other, but as a whole, sovereign, lucid, electric with clarity. Yes, people will misunderstand you. Yes, some will project their fears onto you. Yes, it will be lonely at times. But remember, conformity has its own loneliness, a dull ache you learn to numb. Solitude, when chosen, sharpens the soul. It teaches you how to be with yourself, not as a fallback, but as a foundation. It teaches you how to love others without losing yourself. It teaches you that the deepest connection is not with someone else, but with your own essence, undiluted, untamed. This is not about man-hating. This is about illusion breaking, about seeing through the lie that your worth is measured by your relational status, about reclaiming the sacred space within you that was never meant to be bartered away. The rebellion is simple but not easy. Be whole. Not when he arrives, not when they approve, not when you're finally chosen. Now. Right now. The woman who lives alone without a man is not a warning. She is a possibility, a question, a mirror, and maybe, just maybe, a path. The rebellion isn't coming. It's already here, and its name is you. There is a silence deeper than quiet. A stillness not of absence but of essence. It arrives not when you stop searching for love, but when you stop searching for yourself through others. It arrives not as thunder but as a kind of sacred emptiness, a clearing, a space wide enough for the truth to finally be heard. And here it is, stark, undressed, and irreversible. You were never broken. Not for being alone, not for choosing yourself, not for walking away from what asked you to shrink in order to stay. This is the truth they never told you. You are not a fragment. You are not a missing piece. You are not waiting to be rescued, repaired, or redeemed. You are the whole thing. And that truth is terrifying to a world built on the myth of mutual completion. A world that depends on your self-doubt to sell you everything. From dresses to dating apps to religion. A world that tells you your deepest achievement is to be chosen by someone else, while quietly robbing you of the power to choose yourself. But what if the final stage of awakening is not union, but solitude? Not because solitude is better than love, but because it's more honest. Because in solitude, there's no one to pretend for, no one to mirror, no script to follow, just you. Unrehearsed, undecorated, undeniable. This is not about ending in solitude forever. It's not a vow against connection. It's a recalibration, a resurrection of the self. It is the recognition that love, in its truest form, can only flow between two whole beings, not from lack, but from abundance, not as a transaction, but as a celebration. You are not here to be completed. You are here to overflow. And the woman who lives alone, by choice or by fate, by rebellion or by necessity, she is not on the margins of society. She is its prophet. She is living proof that wholeness is not a reward for being wanted, but a birthright. That's the ultimate truth, isn't it? All this time, you thought you were earning worth through beauty, through loyalty, through endurance. But your worth was never conditional. It was never attached to your relationship status, your desirability, or your ability to be soft when you were bleeding. Your worth precedes your story. Let that land. The woman who lives without a man isn't avoiding life. She's peeling it back to its rawest form. She is discovering that the most sacred union might not be romantic at all. It might be the integration of all the parts of herself that were once scattered, silenced, or suppressed. The child in her who was told to be agreeable, the teenager who equated being wanted with being safe, the adult who was praised for putting others first. She gathers them all, not with judgment but with gentleness, and in doing so, she becomes something most people never will: undivided. But here's the paradox, the same one that began all of this. It is only when you no longer need love that you become truly capable of giving it. It is only when you stop grasping for validation that you become magnetic. It is only when you stop fearing solitude that connection becomes sacred, not desperate. It is only when you can sit in a room alone, without distraction, and feel whole, that any relationship you enter is free from hunger, from projection, from fear. That is the power no one can give you, and no one can take away. Because it is not built on someone choosing you, it's built on you choosing yourself so completely that any love added to your life becomes a gift, not a need. Look at the woman they said would regret it. She walks differently, speaks differently, moves through time as if she belongs to it. Not in it, but of it. She has no urgency to be claimed, no ache to be witnessed. Her eyes do not search, they see. Her body is not an invitation, it is a temple. Her presence does not beg to be understood. It dares others to understand themselves, and some will hate her for it, because people hate what they cannot control. They fear what they cannot explain. They avoid what reflects their unchosen compromises. But others will see her and remember something ancient, something they buried beneath years of roles and roles and roles. They will see her and ask, not why is she alone, but why am I not free? This is the revolution. But it's quiet, personal, sacred. It happens when you stop asking if you're lovable and start asking if you love the life you're living. It happens when you stop shrinking for approval and start expanding into the truth. It happens when you realize that being alone is not a problem to be solved, but a power to be understood. So here you are, at the edge of everything they told you to fear, and in front of you is yourself. Not the self who was taught to serve, not the self who waited to be chosen, not the self who bent to fit inside someone else's vision. You, unbroken, unbothered, undeniably whole. This is not the end of the story. It's the return to its beginning. Because the greatest love story you will ever live is the one where you stop abandoning yourself, where you come home, not to someone else's arms but to your own soul. And maybe, just maybe, in that sacred space of wholeness, love will find you, not to fix you, not to complete you, but to walk beside you in the knowing that you were never missing. And if it doesn't, you will still be standing, not waiting, becoming,